This is a famous painting dating back to the year 1556, now preserved in the Gulistan Museum in Iran. Among the varied and intricate details, one can discern the images of a young prince showing a picture to a bearded figure donning a typical Central Asian headdress. This was Humayun, the Mughal emperor, and the young prince was the future emperor, Akbar. Akbar at that time was barely 13 and was trying his hand at painting. This was an art that much fascinated the young prince. He had two illustrious teachers, the Persian artists Abdus Samad and Mir Said Ali. These two master painters had impressed Humayun during his visit to the court of Shah Tahmasp of Persia. In 1549, on Humayun's invitation, the two masters came to Kabul and set up on a moderate scale the famous Mughal Tasveer Khana, or the Imperial Studio. This, in short, was what scholars consider the true beginning of the Mughal painting. Akbar's training in art possibly never went beyond the rudiments, but his future efforts in organizing the numerous talented artists under one roof was perhaps the most significant development in the history of Mughal art.
After the Sultanate was over and the Mughals had come in, Persian paintings were still coming into the Mughal court. And one of the most popular themes was the stories of animals. Here we have a particular story of the snake and the bull. And these are again repeated over and over again in other kinds of popular tales which were like Aesop's fables. This is the story of the snake, the white snake, drinking from the waters. It is very much like the Aesop's fables, and some of these were known as Anwari Soheli. Anwari Soheli was a text which, like the Aesop's fables, told the story of the animal world, and we find that the Mughal artists were as charmed by these stories as the Persian artists were, from whom these imageries were constantly coming into India. We have here stories of an army marching in and trying to capture a place. It is taken from it is a part of the Mughal repertoire of wars, victories and celebrations. But at the same time, what we must remember is that with the influence of the Muslim rulers, we have a shift from religious themes to secular themes. At the same time, whereas romances, stories and fables of animals gain ground, artists were also being asked to depict incidents from the lives of the ruling monarch. In this particular painting, we have a picture of Babur's gardeners trying to gather almond crops from the various gardens that he had laid out. This painting shows a continuation of the earlier theme where Babur had laid out the garden, but the water was not reaching the plants as it should, and he had the stream diverted. This was also a feat of engineering which the Mughal rulers could claim. So we have here again, the ordinary people who are gathering the fruit. We have here the engineers who are redirecting the stream, and we have here an introduction to the minds of a patron who was more interested in nature and laying out gardens than he was in demolishing temples, or as he has been accused of. In fact, with the coming of the Mughals, we have, through painting, an introduction to a plural culture which became very important, particularly in the period of Akbar, when India was home to many cultural influences and when Akbar was holding his huge religious conferences in the Ibadat Khana.
Humayun, who had earlier lost the throne of Delhi to the Afghans, managed to recover it in the year 1555, but died in an unfortunate accident in 1556. In the midst of the crisis that followed, Akbar succeeded him. But it took him some time to consolidate his position by demolishing the still active enemies of the Mughal state. Thus began one of the most crucial phases in Indian history. The emperor's incessant campaigns in various corners of Hindustan were coupled with attempts to create a stable state structure based on clever administrative reforms. Akbar, who was known to be dyslexic, had little or no formal education, but he had a genuine and deep interest in the history and the arts. Under his patronage, a new kind of illustrated narrative came into being, infused with the newly found skill and vitality that the Persian masters brought to the Mughal court. This was perhaps the most productive phase of the Mughal Tasvirkhana, and its main motivating force was provided by the Persian masters. The emperor, as a patron of arts, cast aside the traditional resistance against figurative art enforced by orthodox ulemas. This reflected the Quranic saying that painting figures amounted to imitation of the creator. Akbar defended his painters with a clever theological argument.
With Akbarnama, we come to the first visual recording of history, and this becomes very important not only in the history of Indian painting but also for those who are interested in Indian history. Akbar was known to have had portraits done of all the grandees of the realm. This is what Abul Fazl tells us. What we come to realize is that even if these portraits have not been found, the portraits that were left behind of even the ordinary people, for example, the scribe as we have here, creates for us that visual world in which Akbar wished to remain. It also left for posterity what the faces of the Mughal rich as well as the Mughal poor were. And now we begin with this portrait of the scribe who is actually writing out the book. Quite a few of the scribes were also painters, and in the period of Akbar we get to know about a large recruitment of Hindu painters from outside. So the variety now in the works of the Akbari artists are really remarkable. The first slide here shows the scribe as he is writing the book. This is the detail from the page of Akbarnama which shows Abul Fazl presenting Akbarnama to Akbar. Here we have two very important portraits. One of the author and friend of Akbar, who in some ways created a narrative account of the entire empire and a new tradition in the writing of history. On the other hand, we also have the first important portrait of the great ruler as he must have appeared to his contemporaries. Akbar was almost treated as a religious guru, and there was a great deal of opposition from the conservative ulemas regarding the various rituals that were being followed in his court. One was known as Sijda, where the subject touched the feet of the ruler, and this was done also among the Sufis when the devotee actually touched the feet of the guru. Now, since Akbar considered himself a leader of the Muslims in Mughal India, his assumption that the subject would touch his feet and thereby show him veneration was not all that wrong. But the ulema made it into a point, and it became a mark of disrespect to God and of extra veneration shown to the ruler, which he does not deserve. Interestingly enough, it is in this painting that we see through the expressions of Akbar and the man who is performing the sijda that there was a definite interpretation which could also be added to the two extreme points of the ulemites and the non-ulemites. And it is in this way that the story of Akbar's rule is being revealed to us with certain innovative interpretations. This is the court, and we find that courts were also held when the king was in the camp. There is an informality, at the same time a continuity of the way the rule was being carried out, how laws were maintained, how subjects interrelated or interacted with the ruler, how the entire areas were covered where the king went out to meet his subjects, and the subjects came in to meet him without there being the coverage of an army, of a large army and a large fortress. Here we have Akbar sitting in court in Agra, and he's still a boy, and in front of his throne sits Mahamanga, his wet nurse. But all the people who are there are still showing him veneration, and it shows very clearly how much of an authority Akbar had even when he was still a minor. Here we have people coming in. Akbar has grown a little older, and they're bringing in various kinds of gifts. At the same time, the animals which are to go on the hunt, for example, the cheetah is also brought in, which shows that the court was a strange place where not only the subjects but also the kind of preparation for a different kind of life, entertainment, at the same time a story of the way the king conducted his daily audience was also clearly revealed. The hunt, for which in the previous painting the preparations were being shown, and we know that to the Mughal aristocrat the hunt was a very important incident. It was almost next to war. There were many kinds of hunts, and one was known as Kamarga, where the villagers were asked to encircle this entire forest area with kind of tin barricades, and then the hunting would start with the emperor leading the way. After that, for 3 days the aristocrats would continue the hunt, and then they would leave, leaving it to the villagers to carry on and complete the hunt. After a particular period, it is known that Akbar had gone tired of this kind of unnecessary bloodshed, and he had stopped going to the hunts. This was interpreted by the conservative Muslim ulemas as a kind of return to Hindu non-eating of the flesh and killing of animals. But actually, this shows that Akbar had his own spiritual experiences and that they were not to be put into a kind of a graph through which we recognize what is truly Islamic and what is not. Here we have again a scene of the court, and we have Mahamanga sitting in front of. The details of this particular court scene is that the faces of the aristocrats are clearer, and we come to know that some of them were who they were and what were their appearances like. Akbar was a ruler who definitely asserted his authority. And in the illustrations of the Akbarnama, some of these particular moments have been shown. This particular painting shows the killing of Adam Khan. Adam Khan was the son of Mahamanga, who was very close to Akbar, and from his infant days, Adam Khan and Akbar had grown up as brothers. But after the conquest of Malwa, Adam Khan came and confronted the guards and wanted to see Akbar himself. The guards said that Akbar was resting and they refused him entrance, in which then Adam Khan killed the guard. Hearing all the uproar, Akbar came out. He was very angry and he stood still, but you could see the charged emotion in him by looking at the way the chadar that he's wearing, how it was fluttering in the wind. Adam Khan was told by the guards that he could not go in, and Akbar, at his refusal, demanded that Adam Khan be punished for killing the guard, and he was thrown down. This is the scene where the throwing down takes place. There is on the upper level Akbar standing still but rigid with anger and full of emotion. Adam Khan is being thrown down, which is causing a lot of confusion and flutter among the people, and they are running helter-skelter. It also shows the fear that the subjects had of the ruler when he was angry. Finally, the story ends with Adam Khan's death when he was picked up and thrown down again. But that incident, even when it is not here, shows in a narrative manner how disrespect to the king would ultimately lead to a person's death, however close that person was to the ruler. If the prisoners represent those people who rebelled against the empire, there were other common men who were brought in as laborers to build up that empire. And one such painting which illustrates this point is the building of Fatehpur Sikri. In this painting we see Akbar standing himself and supervising the works of the laborers in the building of that structure which was to be his pride. Actual site of the gates of Fatehpur Sikri, which still stands today as a memorial to Akbar's imaginative rendition of what he thought was to be the main seat of his empire. We have the actual faces of the laborers who upheld that empire on their backs. These are portraits of prisoners of war, and this is part of a detail of a painting where they are taken in front of the ruler. These men had partaken of a rebellion. Once caught, they were seen to be carrying the skins of the animals in which they would be stitched and then thrown in the heat of the midday sun on the main road, when the skins would shrink and kill them. So here, with the expressions of total abject fear and hopelessness on their part, we have a whole set of people who were on the receiving end of the authority of the Mughal rulers. And it is through these kind of paintings that we have evidence of the class struggle that was quite rampant in Mughal India. We have examples of the authority of Akbar, who was otherwise known as a benevolent ruler, and we get to know the details of the faces of those people who were actually upheld the empire on their backs. So here were those who confronted the subjects as well as those who were rebels, but all in all they formed the common people of the Mughal Empire, about whom we do not get much in the textbooks.